You already own it. Look in your bathroom cabinet, that plain white box or bag you bought for a sore back or a long soak. That same handful of crystals, the ones the English pay $3 for and forget about, will do more for your garden and your kitchen this weekend than a whole shelf of poison bottles down at the big box store. I am going to show you how a single scoop of Epsom salt sends ants marching the other way, stops roaches cold, and puts the life back into a tired, yellowing garden. We have done this for generations. Long before there was a pest aisle with 40 different sprays, my people kept this box on the shelf and used it for a dozen quiet jobs the outside world has been talked into paying for. And that is the thing nobody profits from telling you. There is no company getting rich off a $2 box, so they sell you the expensive stuff instead, and let the cheap answer sit right under your nose. Stay with me. Around the middle of this, I will show you exactly how to rescue a plant that looks half dead for less than the price of a cup of coffee, the way my grandfather did it with a coffee can and his own 2 hands. Before we go on, do me one favor. Drop a comment and tell me your growing zone, or just the state you garden in. I want to see where you all are watching from, because the bugs you fight in Georgia are not the same ones I fight up here, and it changes how you use what I am about to show you. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I can still see my grandmother on the back porch on a July morning, the dew not yet burned off, dipping her fingers into a coffee can of these very crystals and scattering them around the base of her tomato plants before the sun got high. She never called it a hack. She called it good sense. And the whole outside world is only now catching up to what that quiet old woman already knew. Let me tell you first what this stuff actually is, because once you understand it, everything else makes sense. Epsom salt is not table salt. That is the first mistake people make, and it is the most important one to get past. Table salt is sodium chloride, and sodium will kill your soil dead. Epsom salt is something else entirely. It is magnesium sulfate. 2 things plants are starving for, bound up in a crystal that dissolves in water: magnesium and sulfur. That is the whole secret, and it is why this works when the copycat tricks with real salt fail and burn everything they touch. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Magnesium sits at the very center of every green cell in every leaf in your garden. The green color itself, the chlorophyll that catches the sunlight and turns it into food, cannot form without a single atom of magnesium at its heart. No magnesium, no green, no growth. When a plant runs short, the leaves go pale and yellow between the veins while the veins stay green, like a leaf turning to lace. Old-timers called it the yellows. The universities call it magnesium deficiency. Same thing. And the soil runs short more often than you would think. Every hard rain washes magnesium down and away, down below where the roots can reach. The sandier your soil, the faster it leaves. So, a garden that grew fine 10 years ago slowly gets hungry, and the gardener never knows why, and buys a fancy fertilizer that does not fix the real problem. Here is the exact way my family always did it, and the way the research now backs up. 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt dissolved in a gallon of water. Stir it till it disappears. Pour that around the base of your tomatoes, your peppers, your roses, once every 2 weeks through the growing season. For a whole bed, you can scatter a light handful over the soil before a rain and let the water carry it down. Not a pile. A light dusting, like the first frost that barely whitens the grass. Now, why does this matter for the bugs? Because a strong plant is a plant that fights back. A tomato getting the magnesium it needs builds thicker cell walls, tougher leaves, and its own natural defenses against the insects that chew on it. Penn State's extension folks have written plainly that healthy, properly fed plants resist pests and disease far better than stressed ones. A weak plant sends out a chemical distress signal that pests can smell from across the yard. A well-fed one does not. So the very first pest control is not a spray at all. It is feeding the plant right so it never rings the dinner bell. But feeding the plant is only the beginning. Because there is a way to use these same crystals to stop the crawling ones dead at the border, and that is where the box earns its keep. Let me tell you about ants. Ants do not like to crawl over sharp, dry crystals. Think about it from their side for a moment. An ant is a soft little thing, armored on top but tender underneath, and its whole world is built on scent. They lay down invisible trails, one ant to the next, a chemical road they all follow to your kitchen and back to the nest. Break that road, and the whole line falls into confusion. Epsom salt does 2 things to an ant line. First, the dry crystals pull moisture. They are what a chemist calls hygroscopic, which is a big word for thirsty. They draw water out of the air and out of anything soft that touches them, To an ant, crawling over a band of these crystals is like walking across a desert of broken glass that drinks. Second, and this is the part my grandfather understood without any book, the crystals cover up the scent trail, the ants lose their road, they cannot smell their way forward, and the line breaks apart. Here's how you do it. Find where they are coming in. Along the foundation, under the door, that one crack by the porch step where the line disappears, pour a solid line of dry Epsom salt across their path, a band about an inch wide, right across the doorway of their little world. Then take a second batch, dissolve a half cup in a quart of warm water, and spray it right on the trail and around the entry point. The dry line stops them. The wet spray erases the road they already built. Do it in the evening when the dew is not coming, and keep it dry. That is the one rule. Rain washes it away, so under an eave, along a covered foundation, on a windowsill, it holds for days. Out in the open, refresh it after a hard rain. Now, the folks down at the store, they will sell you a can of ant killer for $8, $9, $10, full of things you would not want near where your grandchildren play or where your food sits, and it works. I will not lie to you, but so does a 50-cent handful of magnesium sulfate you already have, and nobody has to warn you to keep the children out of the room. That is the trade the outside world made without ever being told there was a choice. But ants are patient, and one line will not win the war. Therefore, we have to go after where they live, and that is where most people give up too soon. An ant you see on the counter is one of hundreds you do not see. The kitchen ant is a scout. Kill the scout and 40 more take her place, because the nest is safe and full and breeding. To truly turn the tide, you have to reach the nest, and here is a quiet way my people used it. Find the mound. Early morning is best when they are slow and close to the surface. Mix a strong batch, a full cup of Epsom salt in a gallon of hot water, hot as you can pour from the tap, and drench the mound slowly so it soaks down deep rather than running off the top. The heat and the water alone disturb them badly. The magnesium sulfate soaking into the tunnels makes the whole place hostile, dries the delicate ones, and drives the colony to move on. It is not a poison in the way the English mean poison. It is making their house unlivable, so they leave on their own. Do this 2 or 3 mornings in a row for a stubborn nest. The first drench scatters them. The second and third keep the ground unfriendly so they do not settle back in. My father used to say, you do not have to kill every ant, you just have to make your yard a poor place to live, and they will find somewhere else. That patience, that is the plain way. We were never in a hurry to spray everything dead. We just made it not worth their while. And here is a number worth holding on to. A single common ant colony can hold anywhere from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands of workers, and one queen can lay eggs for years. That is why the store spray never seems to finish the job. You are killing the visitors while the household keeps producing. Reach the nest, unsettle the household, and you finish it for pennies. But the ants are outdoors. What about the ones that come inside on 6 legs and make your skin crawl? Let us talk about roaches, because this is where people are the most desperate and the most overcharged. A cockroach is a survivor. They were here before us, and they will likely outlast us all. But every survivor has a weakness, and the roach's weakness is water. A roach can live a surprising while without food. Without water, it does not last. Its whole body is built to hold moisture in, sealed with a thin waxy layer, and everything about how it lives is about staying damp. That is why you find them near the sink, behind the refrigerator, under the dishwasher, in the warm, wet dark. Now think back to what I told you. These crystals are thirsty, hygroscopic. They pull moisture from the air and from anything that touches them. So when you lay Epsom salt in the dark, dry cracks and corners where roaches travel, you are turning their damp highway into a dry one. You are drinking up the very thing they are hunting for. Here is how to set it. Take the dry crystals and work them into the places you never clean. Behind the stove, under the refrigerator, that warm coil space they love. Along the back edge of the cabinet under the sink. In the gap behind the baseboard. Do not make a show pile on the open counter. Push it into the hidden runs, the dark seams where they actually travel, because a roach hugs the edges and never crosses open ground if it can help it. For a stronger pull, my grandmother had a trick. She would mix the Epsom salt with a little sugar. The sugar is the bait that draws them in, the salt is the trap that dries them. Half and half in a shallow jar lid, tucked behind the appliances. The scent of sugar calls them, And once they are feeding in that dry, thirsty powder, it works against them from the inside and the out. Keep it up for a couple of weeks. Roaches do not vanish overnight, no matter what the can promises. But you starve them of moisture, you break their comfort, and slowly the sightings drop off. And you have done it without fogging your whole kitchen with something you then have to wipe off every dish and every fork. Cornell's people, who study insects as careful as anyone alive, have long taught that the surest way to control roaches is to deny them the three things they need: food, water, and harborage. Shelter, in plain words. And of those three, water is the one everybody forgets. The store wants you fighting the roach. The old way says fight the water, and the roach leaves on his own. Now I know what some of you are thinking, and I want to answer it before it stops you. You are thinking, this is fine for somebody with a brand new house or a fresh garden bed, but my garden is 30 years old, my kitchen has cracks I will never find. My roses have been in that same corner since my children were small. Does any of this help me? It helps you most of all. And I want to spend a few minutes right here, because this is the part the Fresh Start advice always leaves out. An old garden is not a problem. It is a bank account that has been slowly drawn down. 30 years of rain has washed the magnesium deep past the roots. 30 years of the same plants in the same soil has pulled out the sulfur. That tired look, the pale leaves, the smaller blooms, the tomatoes that just are not what they used to be, that is not age, that is hunger. And you can fix hunger in a weekend with what is already in your cabinet. Here is what to do this Saturday. No special tools, no trip to the store. Take your established roses, the old faithful ones. Work a tablespoon of dry Epsom salt into the soil at the base of each one, right at the drip line where the feeder roots are, not against the stem. Scratch it in gently with a hand fork, just the top inch of soil. Water it in well. Do this in spring when the buds are swelling, and again in summer. Rose growers have passed this one down for 100 years, and the university trials that finally tested it found the roses greening up and pushing new canes from the base, the strong new growth that an old bush stops making when it is starved. For your established tomato plants, already in the ground and struggling, that foliar spray I mentioned, 1 tablespoon in a gallon of water in a spray bottle, and mist the leaves directly in the early morning or the evening, never in the hot sun. The leaf drinks the magnesium straight in, faster than the roots can pull it from the soil. Within a week, you see the green come back to those pale, lacy leaves. That is the plant telling you it was hungry all along. And for the old lawn or the tired shrub bed, a light scattering of the crystals before a rain, a cup for every 100 square feet or so, worked into your regular routine 2 or 3 times a season. You are not starting over. You are paying back what the years drew down. An established garden responds faster than a new one because the roots are already deep and wide and just waiting to be fed. The lie the outside world tells is that you need to rip it out and start fresh, buy new plants, new soil, new everything. My people never had the money or the inclination to do that. We fixed what we had. We fed the tired ground and brought it back. And a fed garden is a garden that resists the bugs on its own, which brings us right back around to where we started. So let me give you the border trick for the established bed, the one you can lay down this weekend. Around the base of the plants that always get eaten, the hostas, the slug shred, the young cabbage, the tender seedlings, lay a ring of dry Epsom salt crystals a couple inches out from the stem. The sharp, thirsty crystals are miserable for soft-bodied slugs and many crawling pests to cross, the same as they are for ants. It is a moat. A dry, sharp, thirsty moat around the plants you are tired of losing. Refresh it after rain. It costs pennies, and it guards the exact plants you have babied for years. But even a moat has a gap in it, and the smartest pests find that gap. Therefore, the truly settled solution is not just to guard the plant, but to change the ground around it so the pests never gather in the first place. And that leads me to the one I have been holding back. There is a use for these crystals that almost nobody talks about anymore, and when I tell you where I found it written down, you will understand why I saved it for last. Before I hand you that last oldest trick, let me stop for one honest minute, because knowing one use of this box is good, but holding the whole system in your hands is what actually saves your yard. You have been fighting these battles one at a time, haven't you? A spray this week, a new bottle the next, and still the same ants back at the doorstep come morning. That endless, piecemeal fight is exactly what I put an end to in my digital field guide, the Complete Garden Field Edition. It gathers every one of these old protocols into one plain system you download and keep forever. The Garden Blueprint hands you the one systematic mistake that makes every fix temporary, so your work stops undoing itself. The Harvest Blueprint takes you deeper into root-level weed control beyond guesswork and colony kill science that targets the nest you cannot see, the very thing we just talked about with the ants. And the complete edition ties it all together with the 30, 60, 90-day yard rescue seasonal calendar and a quick reference field card, so you always know what to do and when. Here is a test you can run tonight for nothing. The landing page promises a tested system built on about $20 of household materials, safe for kids and pets. Go look in your own cabinet right now, count what you already have on that shelf, and see for yourself how little it truly takes. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this is honest, season-neutral truth. The magnesium the rain washes out is leaving your soil right now, whatever month you are watching this, so the sooner you feed it, the sooner it comes back. Now, back to that third way, the older way, that works on the soil life itself. Most people use Epsom salt for the plant or against the bug, but there is a third way, an older way, that works on the soil life itself, and it is the one my great-grandfather brought over in the family knowledge, the one I had almost forgotten until I went digging. It is the seed and the seedling drench, and it does something the sprays can never do. It builds the pest resistance into the plant before the pest ever arrives. Here is the old method. Before you plant your seeds, whether it is beans, corn, squash, or your tomato starts going into the ground, you prepare the hole. Not the plant, the hole. Into each planting hole, you put a small amount of Epsom salt, a teaspoon for a small plant, mixed into the soil at the bottom, then a layer of plain soil over it so the roots do not sit right on the crystals. Then the seed or the start goes in on top. Now, what does that do? As the root reaches down, it grows into a zone rich in magnesium and sulfur from the very first day. And sulfur is the part everybody forgets. Sulfur is what plants use to build their own natural defense compounds, the sharp oils and bitter substances that make an onion, and give cabbage and broccoli their bite. Those compounds are the plant's own bug repellent built in its own tissue. A plant well supplied with sulfur from the day it sprouts builds more of them. It grows up armed. I found this confirmed in the old agricultural bulletins, the plain government pamphlets they sent to farmers back in the early 1900s, before the chemical companies had a foothold. They wrote about sulfur in the soil and healthier, more pest-resistant crops as a settled matter of fact, the way you would write that rain makes things wet. It was common knowledge. Then the sprays came along, and there was money in the spray and none in the soil, and slowly that plain fact got buried under 100 product labels. The knowledge did not die. My people kept using it. The outside world just forgot. So this weekend, if you are putting anything in the ground, do it the old way. A teaspoon in the hole, a layer of soil, then the plant. You are not treating a problem. You are raising a plant that resists the problem from its first breath. That is the difference between the plain way and the store way. The store sells you the cure over and over, every season, forever. The old way builds the plant so it barely needs curing at all. And here is the finale, the piece I promised you, the one that ties the whole thing together and that I have never once seen sold in any store because there is nothing in it to sell. Combine all three. This is what my grandmother did on that July porch and never explained, because to her it was just the morning chore. Start the plant right with the salt in the hole so it grows up armed with its own sulfur defenses. Feed it through the season with the tablespoon per gallon drench so it never goes hungry and never rings that distress bell that calls the bugs in. And guard the border with the dry crystal moat and the erased scent trails so the crawling ones cannot gather. 3 uses of one $2 box working together, and between them they do the job of a fertilizer, a soil amendment, and 3 different pest products, all from the one white bag on your shelf. That is the secret the whole video was walking toward, not one clever trick. The system, the plain, patient, whole season way my people used a single common thing to do what the outside world now buys a dozen bottles to accomplish. And it was never hidden from you on purpose by any one villain. It was buried by an entire industry that found it more profitable to sell you the problem one aisle at a time than to let you remember the answer was always $2 and already in your house. Let me give you a few more quick ones before we finish. The small everyday uses my community keeps alive. So you have the whole toolbox. For your potted plants, the ones on the porch that always look tired by August, a teaspoon of Epsom salt in the watering can once a month. Potting soil runs out of magnesium faster than garden soil because every watering flushes the nutrients out the bottom of the pot. That is why the container plants fade first. Feed them and watch them fill back in. For your evergreens and your shrubs going yellow in the needles or leaves, a cup scattered around the base in early spring, worked in and watered. The yellowing evergreen is very often a hungry evergreen, and this is the cheapest feeding you will ever give it. For the tomato that grows tall and green but sets little fruit, the foliar spray at flowering time. Magnesium helps the plant use the phosphorus it needs to make fruit and seed. A well-fed plant at bloom time sets more and holds more. For slugs and snails on a damp night, that ring of dry crystals, and if you want it stronger, crush the crystals a little finer so the barrier is tighter. Soft-bodied crawlers will not cross it while it is dry. For fungus gnats in your houseplant soil, those little black flies that rise up when you water, let the top of the soil dry between waterings and dust, a thin layer of Epsom salt on the surface. The dry, thirsty crystals make the top inch inhospitable to the larvae that live there, and gnats need that damp top layer to breed. And for the vegetable garden pests that chews leaves at night, remember the whole lesson. The strongest defense is not the spray you reach for after the damage is done. It is the fed plant, the armed plant, the plant that grew up in magnesium and sulfur-rich ground and builds its own bitterness the bugs would rather not eat. Prevention was always the plain way. We could not run to the store every time something went wrong. We had to raise plants that could mostly take care of themselves, and this box was a big part of how. Now, a few honest words, because I will not sell you a miracle. Epsom salt is not a cure for everything, and anybody who tells you it is has something to gain. It will not fix a soil that is short on nitrogen, that is a different hunger with a different answer. It will not by itself end a heavy infestation that has already taken over, though it will help you turn the tide, and you can overdo it. Too much magnesium can lock up other nutrients the plant needs, so more is not better. Stick to the amounts I gave you. A tablespoon per gallon, a teaspoon in the hole, a light hand always. My grandfather had a saying about fertilizer and salt both. You can always add more tomorrow. You cannot take it back out today. The point is not that this one box does everything. The point is that it does a great many things well for almost nothing, and the outside world was quietly talked into forgetting that, so it would keep buying the expensive single-purpose bottles instead. One box on the shelf, used with a little knowledge, replaces a whole row of products that each cost more than the box and do less. That is what I most want you to walk away with. Not the tricks, though the tricks are real and they work. What I want you to keep is the plain truth underneath them. You have been sold your own helplessness. You have been taught that every problem in the garden and the kitchen needs its own product, its own aisle, its own price tag, when the truth is that a handful of common knowledge in a $2 bag handles most of it the way it handled it for my grandparents and theirs before them. You did not lose the ability to do these things. It was just quietly taken from you, one clever advertisement at a time, until you forgot you ever had it, and now you have it back. That is worth more than any single trick I gave you today. If you are the kind of person who is tired of overpaying for what the good Lord and a little know-how already provide, then you belong here with the rest of us who would rather remember the old ways than keep renting the new ones. That is who we are. People who refuse to keep paying season after season for what nature and a plain box on the shelf give for pennies. So here is what I am asking you to do. Go back to that comment box and tell me your growing zone or your state, like I asked at the start. I truly read them, and it tells me what to make next, because the ant that plagues a man in Texas is not the one that plagues a woman in Ohio, and I want to serve the folks who are actually here. Do not just think it, type it. This audience is quiet, and I would rather hear from you. And if you want to keep recovering this kind of knowledge, the plain and practical things the outside world buried because there was no money in them, then come along with us. This is not about supporting a channel. It is about a group of us putting back together, piece by piece, the common sense that got sold off. Subscribe and stand with the folks doing that. Next time, I am going to show you the one thing my grandmother kept in a jar by the kitchen. I'm Eli, and if you're still with me, here's where it gets good. Inside the Amish field circle, I continue this very video, walking you through the whole season-long regimen. And when you've got a question, you ask me, and I answer you myself. You won't be doing this alone. Thousands of Old Ways growers are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. And you can cancel anytime with one click. If these Epsom salt tips helped you, do stay with me, subscribe, and look through my other videos where I share plenty more simple, natural ways to keep your home and garden pest-free.